I'm pleased now to come to the main event. First of all, I want to introduce our star of the show, Whitney Hess. She's an independent user experience consultant based here in New York City. And of course, she, like many others, helps organizations better understand and serve their target audiences. So who has she worked with? Well, some of the past clients include Seamless, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum down in D.C., the King Center, Boxy, and many other startups. In addition, before she went independent, she was on the design team over at LiquidNet and began her career over at digital ad agencies where she worked on things like American Express, New York Times, Allstate. Basically, she's very talented. She has a BA in professional writing and human-computer interaction from Carnegie Mellon University, and also a master's in HCI from the same organization. And if you haven't looked it up, I encourage you to go to her blog called Pleasure and Pain, which is all about improving the human experience. So, without further ado, I think that you know our chapter president, Gloria. And Gloria and Whitney are going to have a cozy conversation with all of you. And thank you in advance, by the way, for submitting some of your questions. I think Gloria is going to incorporate some of them into the event. Take it away.
Thank you. And also, very quickly, I wanted to, Christine Novell, where are you? I saw you here just a second ago. Wanted to thank you for bringing it to our attention about the passing of Bill Mulgridge, who was the founder of IDEO, and probably one of the UX community's great leaders. So that is something that we wanted to acknowledge and pay our respects to. Moment of silence. And we're back. Now, let's see. In case you guys are wondering what brought me to this particular, this particular topic. It's like, so why did I want to reach out to you in the first place? And how am I even qualified to talk to you about this? I was also independent for about 3 years. 2 of those years I worked for one of those monster law firms on Madison Avenue, and because I didn't handle my finances and taxes and paperwork properly, it took me another year to try and get myself back on track. So I think that I've always been fascinated with how Whitney has been able to do the solo thing and do it gracefully, because I've been wiping out here and there. So I currently work for the Chase Interaction Design team, but now let's turn focus to Whitney, and we've both spent time in some large corporations here, and I guess the first question I want to ask you is, how do you know when it's time to go on your own? When have you just reached that point where you just can't take it another minute, and that's it, I got to get out of here, I can't take it?
Well, it was a long journey, but the moment where I finally decided this is it was a quick one. So firstly, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone here for coming. And there's a lot of empty seats in the front. So it's going to be an intimate conversation. So if you find yourself wanting to come closer, you're encouraged to do so. And thank you to Gloria for having me. So as was explained, my trajectory was working in an ad agency, a couple of those, working for a financial software company, and now being independent. And I have been independent for the last 4 years. And what initially prompted me to want to go independent was that I had been doing freelance work on the side of my jobs for 3 years prior. When I started my first full-time job, I found it, like many of us do, hard to make ends meet with an entry-level job that really wasn't paying enough to keep me going in New York. And so my initial reason for starting to do freelance work was just to make extra money. But then over time, I started realizing that the interactions that I was having with clients that I could control outside of my full-time work was becoming much more fulfilling. And in 3.5 years, I had moved around to 3 different companies, and I really kept thinking each time I took a new job, this is going to be a better place. And I finally had to acknowledge that it wasn't them, it was me. The first company that I was at was very process oriented, and I thought, oh, this is way too much documentation. This is silly. I don't believe in this. Then I went to a place that had basically no process, and I realized, well, we're getting nothing done, and I'm having to fight my way into meetings because people don't realize I'm supposed to be there. I went from a team of 40 interaction designers to me being the only one. And then I thought, you know what, it's the web. It's the web and these agencies. I'm going to go in-house somewhere where I can work on software. And it's really, you know, it's an expert system. It's used in people's jobs all day. And we're going to have this captive audience of users that I can do user research with. And I'm going to get to do all the parts of the process that I believe in. And it did afford me those opportunities. Then I realized that I didn't care much for finance. And in each time I had managers who really did their best, given that they had to manage me. And I always thought that I was doing a great job, but I really wasn't navigating the politics of a corporation very well. And
were you the world's worst employee?
I was definitely the world's worst employee because I was so focused on doing the right thing that I didn't really do what was best for my job, for my career, and I wasn't putting myself in a good position to be promoted, to be recognized as being a team player. I was obsessed with doing what was right for the business and for the customer, when even that involved me kind of going over my boss's head. And that was often frowned upon. So I realized after a while that I had kind of always been behaving as a consultant in these companies, and that my kind of challenges with authority and wanting to do the right thing and wanting to have more control over my projects ultimately led me to bite the bullet, quit my full-time job, and keep doing the independent thing.
And people thought you were crazy for doing this, right?
Oh, well, I quit my job in August of 2008. And then the bottom fell out, you know, and...
So you timed it real well.
Yeah, exactly. I timed it really well. Kind of what happened was that I'd been thinking about this for a long time, but I went on a vacation, and the day that I came back, I just knew that I couldn't do it anymore. That working inside an office every day was so antithetical to my whole way of being and how I wanted to interact in the world, that I walked in and my boss said, oh, we have so much to catch up on, but I want to hear about your trip. Do you want to go first or should I go first? And I said, I think I should go first. And I quit.
Why don't I go first?
Yeah. And you know what? He probably was relieved. And he had been independent himself in the past. And he said, you're doing the right thing. This is what you should be doing. So that he was supportive made it a much easier transition.
That's always interesting when you get that weird look in your boss's eyes, that faraway look like, take me with you.
Yeah. He wasn't doing that because he was in a great position at the time, but because he had been independent, he knew that it suited my personality much better than having 7 layers of hierarchy over me.
And did you feel different physically? Like, was a weight? How did you walk out of there?
You know, it's funny because my last day, you know, when I finally walked out of the office and I threw myself a freedom party, and I was very energized about it. And then that was a Friday, and then that Sunday, I was living in Trebek at the time, not far from here, and I walked down the Hudson River, and I was watching the sunset, and I was by myself, and it had occurred to me that the next day, Monday, I wasn't going to have to go anywhere, and I wasn't going to have to answer to anyone. And suddenly a wave of panic came over me, and I thought, what the hell did I just do? And, you know, the next day I woke up and I did what I thought was necessary for me to get through the day as effectively as possible, and I've been doing that every day since. And I haven't had a master plan, and I haven't, you know, had my 5-year goals and all that stuff. I haven't been super deliberate.
Oh, no biannual review?
No biannual reviews, no 360s. And yeah, I just keep making the best decisions that I can every day, and it's amazing how quickly 4 years has gone by.
I believe that, and I don't mean to knock, you know, a corporate experience, because I mean, obviously it's working for me, you know, right now, and like there's a lot of good things about it, but you know, I think that you know, I'd be interested, like one of the things that we talked about on the phone, you know, was have you ever had to fire a client? You know, so like you've gone on your own, you've taken on, like you're on your own for the first time, glad to get the work, I'm sure, and now comes the process of learning who it is that you want to work with.
Yeah.
You know, so that so that was the question I remember that we talked about. Have you ever had to fire somebody? How do you know? You know, because I think that people are nervous. Like, how would I know if I've entered into a bad thing with the first new job, that, you know, the first client I take on?
Well, I certainly have become more selective over the years. I was not selective when I first got started, because every person that indicated an interest in working with me, I was convinced was the last person that would ever be interested in me. And so I jumped at every opportunity to work with basically anyone. And I had to really learn a lot from those experiences in order to recognize, firstly, who's a legitimate company. Because when you're independent, you're attracting not only major corporations, but a lot of startups. And there's the startup vibe and the passion that people who work there have is very attractive to me. But then there were chances that came my way when I met with the person. I realized it was just him in his apartment, and that was a little too early stage for me. So it definitely, yeah, it was like, come meet me in my office. By the way, my office is upstairs on the 3rd floor of my house. I'm like, you could have made that clearer before I came out here. So there have definitely been some like trial and error moments of, okay, I didn't really do the due diligence on that one. In terms of firing a client that was a bad fit, it has happened. And I cannot underscore how painful it is. Because when you run your own business, this is not just work, it is your life. And when you have to essentially end a relationship with someone, and there's really, you try to do it gracefully, but you are essentially telling them, I would rather not take the money. I'd rather give you back the money that you gave me than keep working on this project. That's tough. That's tough for even the strongest willed person to hear. So it has happened, and there was one project in particular that I can remember, unfortunately not fondly, where I realized about 1/3 of the way into it that there was no chance of success for me there, that the person who brought me into the project actually had very little authority in the company, and that no matter how much trying to convince the CEO I could possibly do, they were not interested in having me there. And so I had to back out, and I did have to give back part of the money. And that sucks when you've looked at, say it was a 12-week project, and you've saved that time, and other people have come along and wanted to work with you, and you've said, no, sorry, I'm not free until whatever day, and then and you've accounted for that money. I mean, the second that contract is signed, you're like, okay, this is where I can allocate this, and having to give that back sucked, but it was the right decision for me, because I have come to recognize that life is very short, and that I don't want to waste my time working in situations that have absolutely no chance of success. This is not like it's a tough UX problem. It was a people problem, and it was not one that I could solve.
A business manager type problem. I mean, I think with I guess the real underscore of that question was, over time, have you developed your own set of red flags that you look for? And also, I think it's, I want to make sure that the audience understands that, even if there's probably no such thing as making the perfect business relationship the very first time as you strike out on your own.
Right.
And that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to end up in some real dud deals, and that life doesn't end after that. You do survive this, yes?
Yes, absolutely. So there's two parts to that. First is really learning how to sense whether it's going to be a positive relationship. And as an independent practitioner, when someone comes to you and wants to hire you, you have to interview them so much more than they have to interview you. There are many, many more aspects to understanding their business that are necessary when you're independent, because you need to know where the money is coming from. You need to make sure that the money is going to keep coming. You need to make sure that they have good business practices that you're willing to be associated with. You don't have the benefit of a manager to protect you in any situation. You have to do all that due diligence yourself. So I put prospects through the ringer, and if they can come out the other side, it's going to be a great working relationship. If there is a single moment in any preliminary conversation where I'm like, that's not what I would have expected, or that doesn't sit right with me, it's done. The conversation is done. Because I learned over and over and over again that people teach you everything you need to know about them prior to signing that contract. How quick they are to respond, who they need to get their buy-in from, how they talk about the work that you do, how that work is valued within the company, how much time you're able to get with the senior leaders. I mean, all of these things impact how successful you can be in the organization. So if there's anything off about those initial interactions, it is not going to be a successful relationship.
And you've learned to trust your gut on this.
Over time, and for a long time, and I still do this. I just had a situation where I knew it was going to be bad, and I went into it kind of as a favor to a friend who works at the company, and I really regret it, because everything that I thought was going to happen happened, and it's not a positive experience for me, and it's not a positive experience for them, and I ended up not extending the contract. The day the contract ended, they wanted more work, and I was like, thanks, but I'm going to have to move on.
Interesting. I think that when we were also talking about that, this whole conversation, I think, revolved, or what I find that you're talking about a lot, the skills that are needed to survive, have more to do with, probably less to do with being an expert, Photoshop expert. Being a successful, independent person it's not based on whether or not you're the world's best. It's not, let me, right there, is that good? Is that good? I have a low voice. It's not dictated on whether or not you are the world's best, MySQL, programmer or something like that. The skills have to do with negotiation and with, diplomacy, rapport. Those are really, really tough things to teach. And we talked a little bit about how you've caught yourself maybe working differently with men than you work with women. Things that you've caught about yourself. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Sure. So people often ask me, how do I go independent? Because I really want to focus on the work. I love the work that I do, and I feel like in the job that I'm currently in, there are too many obstacles in the way for me to do great work. I really want to focus on the work, that's why I want to go independent. And my answer is always, don't think that being independent means that you're any closer to the work or that it's all about the work, because when you are an independent practitioner, whether it's a user experience designer or anything else, you are a business person first. The designer, engineer, marketer, whatever identity is secondary. Because if you are not the business person, you're not going to have a business that enables you to keep doing the work. So I would say it fluctuates, but on average, I probably spend less than a third of my week actually practicing user experience. The rest of that time is spent managing the client relationship, which in my opinion has a lot to do with user experience, but it's way outside of the kind of typical methods that we usually use to define what UX is. I spend a lot of time making sure that I'm top of mind, meaning tweeting, blogging, doing events like this. I want to be as visible as I possibly can be so that when a company needs a user experience consultant, I'm one of the first that they think of. That makes my business stronger. I spend a lot of time doing the billing and the accounting and all of these things. I mean, you are really not just able to do the work all the time. So it's really crucial that you be ready to run a business. I have chosen over 4 years to remain independent, meaning that I don't have full-time employees. Sometimes I subcontract out. But even though my business isn't growing in numbers, you know, in terms of the people that are working there, I'm not trying to make an agency. It has grown significantly in terms of earnings, you know, my income, and in the types of projects that I take on. I went from, in my first year, doing 17 projects, to my second year doing 8, my third year doing 5, and in my fourth year, I haven't counted because I just recently hit the 4th anniversary, I think I was up at 15. The nature of those projects has changed tremendously. They've become much more strategic. So it isn't just, can I take on another set of wireframes to do? Can I churn these out at night while I'm doing this one during the day? Like, the nature of the work has changed, so growth has been something very different. And I'm constantly thinking about how to grow and how to attract a different set of clients, or how to support some of those goals that I have personally by structuring my business in a way that allows me to have the kind of life that I want to lead, because that's really what my motivation is to keep doing this. In terms of the soft skills that are required to make that possible, it's not about how great you can draw a wireframe or how well you can write a functional specification, or whether you come up with the best ideas for organizing information or an interaction model or any of it. Quite frankly, I don't think I'm anywhere close to the best user experience practitioner. I would even say that as a practitioner, I've probably decelerated my learning since I've been independent, because I'm not working with other designers on a daily basis to teach me new things. I have to go to conferences that I have to pay for, no budget, right? I have to make my own budget, to go to conferences, to be inspired by other people, to learn new methods. I've got to read the blogs, I have to follow people on Twitter. Like, all that stuff has to come from me. And so I wouldn't say that I'm the best practitioner. I would say I'm probably one of the best.
Happiest. One of the happiest.
I'm definitely one of the happiest. That I'm sure of. But I think I'm also one of the better business people in our space, because I'm so focused on what it means to run a user
You're getting
experience
the pure
consulting
stuff.
business.
You're getting like the raw crystal meth right there, right?
Yes.
It's like, you're not getting a watered down, diluted version, that sometimes we end up having in practice. How much work is out there, in your opinion? Is it overwhelming? Or
there is so much work out there. The market is very hot. And you know what? Even though I went independent at a time when things were crashing and we went into a major recession, the UX field has been on an upswing ever since, and I haven't seen it slow. There's a ton of work for independents, especially in New York, because there are so many startups who aren't yet committed to bringing a UX practitioner in-house because they're not really sure how to use one, or they do have someone but they need a project to be done that takes more of a long-term view, and their resources need to be focused on keeping the site live today, and responding to challenges that are coming up in the immediate term. So they'll reach out to someone who's independent in order to take that step back and do some kind of longer term work. Agencies are hiring left and right, and it's, especially in tough financial times, it's so much easier for them to bring in a consultant because they don't have to keep the lights on for you. Like, they don't have to find a desk for you. They don't have to pay your benefits. Yes, your rate over the course of a year is significantly higher than it would be if you were full-time salaried, but they don't most of the time expect that you're going to be there for a 40-hour week and whatnot. So definitely, I mean, there's so much work out there, and I feel like too much of my time, and I've been working to be better at this, is matching UX designers with companies that need them, because I've become, I guess, more visible through the work that I do. People come to me, both companies that want to hire somebody and practitioners that are looking for work, and I end up playing matchmaker a lot, which, it's great for karma, and I love placing people in the right jobs, but it doesn't put money in my pocket, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can relate. Actually, as president of this organization, I do find that one of the things I never expected to be was somebody who was handling introductions as often as me. A lot of introductions, and I can't keep it straight sometimes.
Yeah.
But so yeah, you mentioned that this was this is your feeling for how much work there is here in New York. What about, say, what is your vibe or your experience been with working, say, with folks from other countries?
Actually, interestingly enough, the majority of my work is coming from other countries at the moment. I have a client in Singapore, and I have a client in Israel. Can everyone hear me? Is this too low? Is this better? So I'm working with a company in Singapore right now. I've had clients in Israel. I have had clients in South Africa. The more that I travel and the more conferences that I go to on user experience around the world, the more I've learned that what we practice is universal, and it is happening everywhere. I mean, UX is no longer a US, Europe-centric thing at all. I am a native New Yorker, and I've unfortunately always had this attitude that we're ahead of everything. And so when I went to Hong Kong for the first time in February to a conference, I was expecting there were going to be people there that had less experience with UX, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. I was in Bogota, Colombia. I had the same expectation, couldn't be further from the truth. The kinds of work that they do, the challenges that they face, the value that they bring to their organizations, it's identical to what we do. And yes, there are cultural differences that have to be taken into account for their customer bases, sometimes not as extensive as they once were. The web is unifying, and this field is global. And so I'm fairly certain that if you are connected to the right people, you introduce yourself to the right people, and you seek those people out, that you could work in any country in the world and be a user experience practitioner and be very successful at it.
So as a pushy New York dame.
Yes. That is a fairly good definition.
So what have been some of your more memorable cultural adjustments that you've had to make?
Well, you brought up the gender issue earlier. And I've said this to you before. I have never thought of myself as a woman. You know, it's being a woman, heavy quotes, not part of my identity. It hasn't been until recently, actually. And that was in part because I was raised by a successful career woman. Both my parents are in business together, and my mom is the front woman of the business. And so I was unaware of this whole, like, women have a harder time in business thing, which is actually really true. I've only experienced it recently as I have been exposed to more people and more companies. And so one of the things that I had to overcome when I was working with this company in Israel, for instance, was that the team at the time was 8 developers, all male, all Israeli. And I had conducted a bunch of user research for them, and I went to Tel Aviv to show them what I had learned and to help them to better understand their customer base. And they didn't like some of the things that I had to say because it challenged some of their own perspectives on what they were doing, or, as one of them said, well, that's not how my friend does it. Okay. Do you only want your friend to be your customer, or do you want these other people to be your customer too? So I was in a situation where I had to very aggressively defend my findings against 8 Israeli men. And they're tough. They're tough, and they are not afraid to speak their mind. But I don't think that they were expecting me. So there was a moment in this very heated discussion, me only getting passionate because I so wanted them to hear what their prospective customers and existing customers had to say, because I think, like many of us, we're very passionate about this stuff. And it was a tough meeting, and at one point, when I realized I wasn't getting anywhere, I had to excuse myself, and I walked downstairs, and I took a walk around the block, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And then I washed my face, and I walked back in, and I let them have it again, until eventually they saw it my way. When you are independent, there is no one who's going to go to bat for you. And I have had to learn diplomacy in a way that I never really understood. I've had to learn to stand up for myself in a way that I don't think I ever fully did. My communication skills have had to be enhanced significantly because my job is now about persuading people to, to understand the things that I've learned and to involve them in the process. And if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my job well, and I have this need to leave every client relationship a positive one. I want to help their business. That's why I do this. So, there are gender issues, there are cultural issues, but at the end of the day, you have to recognize that when you're independent, there is no one there to protect you. And if you don't stand up for yourself, and if you don't have the willingness to really lay it all out on the line and just get fired, but because you were doing something you believed in, it's not something you should be doing.
I think that's a really important point. I know that I walked on the razor's edge definitely when I was at the law firm for a while, because I realized that when I was in a boardroom or a conference room, there was no one. I'm sitting there with a lot of operations people glaring at me, and there's nowhere to hide. So you have to really believe what you're doing.
Yeah.
And when you have that confidence, I think it helps a lot.
And on the inside, the reason why I'm admitting that I went and I cried is because the confidence on the inside and what you're portraying on the outside don't necessarily have to match. You just have to be skilled at exuding that confidence no matter what you're currently feeling. And you can have that moment to yourself later. And I screamed and I called my boyfriend and I cursed and, you know, you do what you do. But in that room, you are a professional and you're a force to be reckoned with. And that's why they hired you.
Very, very, very good. Well, at this point, I think we're up for the moderated part of the conversation. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share with the audience some of the questions that came in via the monkey survey that we put out there before during the registration.
Before you do that,
Sure.
Is this working for everyone? Is this
Everybody
stuff
good?
interesting? Okay, because
Anybody bored out of their mind?
Because I can ramble, and this is stuff I can talk about all night. So if I'm going off in a direction that's...
We actually had a phone call to go over like even just these questions before, you know, in preparation for tonight, and it was hard for us to stop. We were like, you know, I was like, I knew it was going to be tough just to like keep to these few questions, but I did want to make sure that we had, you know, and gave our audience. So, and we're actually going to have an open question answer period in about 15 minutes after we do these questions right here. And I apologize. Some of the questions that came in were pretty long, but I think
impressive.
We had some really good ones. The first one, I know this one. It happens to be from Freddie. How do blog posts or social media comments affect obtaining clients? I think we talked about that just a little bit. But
Okay.
Elaborate.
Is the person that asked that question in the room?
Yeah. Sorry, Freddie. I blew your cover. I
Hi.
didn't know if you wanted to keep
Sorry.
that quiet.
Do you mean the ones that I post or the ones that people post about me?
The one that you post.
Okay.
Specifically the one you posted on the 13th.
Yeah, you were all over it recently. I think
What did
you wrote about VCs.
What's the one that I wrote on the 13th?
Yeah, that one. The one about
The one about VCs?
Brent Wilson responded and Scott Burton.
Yeah. So, yes, when you challenge other people and you're independent, you have to recognize that all the heat's going to come right back on you. So, over the years, that's something that not only have I gotten used to, but I've come to really enjoy, because I need to learn. If I'm not learning, then I can't keep doing this. I won't be able to compete in the market. And so why I blog and why I tweet and share my ideas is to ensure that I am understanding things to the greatest potential that I possibly can. And when I have a misunderstanding of something, or I'm not aware of the way something works, that I can be challenged and I can be put in my place and I can be made aware of a whole new field of knowledge that I can then go explore. So it is so important to me to initiate those conversations. I had been blogging for 8 months before I went independent, and tweeting at the same time. I started tweeting and blogging at the same time. And it was because I had built those relationships with people through social media and through my blog that I was able to go independent as successfully as I have, because I have used those connections to bring in work. Sharing your views, sharing your perspective, being a resource for people in the community, all of that helps to elevate your profile and to connect you with people that are eager to work with you. So, you know, when Gloria and I were prepping for this, I asked, to what extent can I curse?
Oh yeah, this is fun.
Because I wanted an informal session today because I'm an informal person, but anyway, this is a little more formal than I was, because you're all looking at me.
Prepare yourself, okay?
The truth is, like, if you're not prepared to be a whore, you can't be independent.
I love that expression. I think it just says it well.
Everything that you do has to be about making sure that you are as visible as possible. I don't want to reply to job posts. Like, When that happens, I will end my business if I have to reply to job posts. I want the work to come to me. I don't want to be one of 10 people that they're interviewing. I want people who are seeking to work with me, specifically. That starts the relationship in a very different place. And as a business owner, I have to ensure that I'm maintaining that kind of equilibrium in the business relationship. Because I'm independent, I'm already seen as lesser. You know, my lawyers can't go up against a 20,000 person company's lawyers. So I have to create that image of being of equal footing, though I'm only one person. So having the blog and the tweets and being as public as I can be really helps to elevate that status and put me in a better position to have successful relationships with these companies.
I think that's a good place to end that one right there. Freddie, you think that was a good one?
Yeah.
That was good.
And yes, a couple of the VCs are pissed off, but I don't really care.
No, you're nobody if you aren't like making somebody angry every once in a while, right? Here's a question that came in. It's part of a question series, but I'm going to grab these couple that really jump out at me. Do you have any position on co-location, working on-site with the team? Is it necessary to actually be on-site, or can you be also effective if you do from home?
It really depends on the kind of work that you're doing. So as I said, over the last 4 years, the type of work that I do has evolved. I now am a much more strategic player with these companies. I see myself as a partner in helping them to develop their product strategy and oftentimes their corporate strategy. In those situations, it's not really important that I be on site because it's more about the ways in which I'm helping senior leadership teams change the way they think. When I'm producing artifacts and when I'm collaborating with designers and developers and copywriters and marketers, where we're actually producing together, I find it much more effective to be on-site, but I don't work on-site. None of my projects are on-site projects where they have a desk for me and I go and I sit there from 9 to 6 or whatever. I manage my own schedule, I manage my own time, I come and go as I please, I set the meetings, and that's really important for me personally because I do this so that I can have a certain kind of lifestyle. I travel when I want, I don't work on days that I don't want to work, and I try very, very hard to maintain a balance between my work life and my family, my friends, my hobbies, and all these other things. And I find that running my own business has given me the flexibility to do that. However, if a project is short-term and we're going to be proposing major changes in the organization, I like to be there as much as I can to walk them through it and to make them feel like they're being taken care of, because change is scary for people, especially when it's being dictated from a consultant who, the way they see it, doesn't have skin in the game.
Right.
So being there helps, but I don't think it's necessary.
Well, that actually leads us into the other part, another question here. If you're brought in just for consulting and therefore leave before it's fully executed, it kind of sounds like that doesn't really happen, not if the project's going well. Like, how do you know your solutions actually produce the results? And this is actually kind of another person asked a similar question, like how do you actually know once your project is done? How do you stay in touch, or how, you know, that they're happy with what you've done?
Okay, so in the case where I'm actually managing the team or hands-on involved in creating this product, I have in my contract the final phase of the engagement is ongoing through the development process and post-launch, so that I can be there to do usability testing at multiple stages, so that I can be there to help make tweaks post-launch once they're getting feedback, so that I can help them set up customer feedback processes and tools and whatnot. So I stay as involved as I possibly can through post-execution. But as I said, a lot of my projects are becoming more and more strategic, and they're not really about this product, this feature, this rollout. And so in those situations, I almost make myself like a friend of the CEO, a friend
like
of
an
the
advisor.
an advisor. And in those situations, and more of my projects are becoming that, it doesn't feel like a project once that initial getting to know you period is over, because I'm always staying in touch. I'm sharing links with them, you know, from reports or articles or blog posts, whatever, that are along the lines of topics that we've talked about, things that they've been interested in. If new things come up that I think that they should be considering, you know, there's a lot of email, phone, lunches, all that sort of communication.
Develop a long-lasting relationship.
Yeah, that's my ultimate goal as a consultant. Yeah, that I'm not just in and out. But there are companies that, you know, really just want you for a small segment of the time, and then I follow up and I ask, you know, what some of the results were, so that I have some numbers around what I do, so that when I'm speaking with a prospective client, I can explain how my work really benefited that company, and it helps me get the next project.
This is one more question. The question here was, you know, with specific advice for women who want to become solo UX practitioners, but it almost sounds like the method and the medium have become like the great equalizer. I see that do you feel that you have any unfair or more advantage than your compatriots who are guys who are in the same space? Do you feel any?
I have had some negative attention that I wish I didn't believe was because I'm a woman, but I know is because I'm a woman, from men who very likely would not have said the same things to another man. That's just how it is. I mean, we work on the web, and unfortunately there is a lot of sexual harassment on the web. That's just a part of the world, the sandbox that we choose to play in. And
are you talking about through social media, or are you talking about like in the actual job?
Not in the job. Thankfully, I've not had that experience. Through social media, in person, whatever. There are, I just think there are people that see a young woman and assume weaker than me. It just tells me that they don't know me very well. And so I have had some negative attention, and it hurts at first, but then I realize that that means I must be doing something really right if they feel like they need to knock me down a peg. And in those situations, I've just tried to maintain as much grace and composure as I possibly can and keep doing exactly what I do, and realize that they must be in a really bad place to feel the need to be negative about someone else in their own community. I don't think that that means that it's more challenging for a woman to be independent or to be a user experience designer or to be in technology at all. I just think that there are still issues in our field with women and equality, and they're going to be there. But at the same time, it has probably gotten me on more stages than a man with my exact same traits, exact same education and background, and exact same experience, because they need to fill a female slot. And I'm not above being their token female, because men have had the advantage by being men for forever. That's okay. If I'm going to get the advantage for being a woman, happy to take it.
All right. That concludes the part that we'll talk about the questions that came in. Although, to let you know, Whitney is planning to stick around for a while after the event to answer additional questions. So now we'll do the 15-minute Q&A, the open mic part. And let's see, Ashad, I believe you have a question.
It's a double question, actually.
Can you maybe hand the mic over so that way?
It's a double question. The first part is, I'm assuming most of your work is web as opposed to UX in general, and how much of it is becoming more mobile as opposed to just web or in general signage or anything else. The second question, any chance it's not part of the format, perhaps we can see some samples of the work and comments on it, which will make it more visual and exciting. Maybe it's not possible.
You mean
to
here
do it.
tonight?
Yes.
It's
probably not possible.
Yeah, we didn't actually plan for that tonight because I think that would be a whole other.
I have my laptop, and if you want to go over in a corner after this and you want to look through my portfolio, I'm more than happy to show it to you.
I'm sure I won't be alone.
UX on the web versus in general, all the work that I do is digital. So some of it's websites, some of it's web apps, some of it's mobile, some of it's kiosk, some of it's tablet. But like I said, where I'm moving currently is elevating UX to a much higher part of the organization, where I'm no longer focused on designing products, I'm focused on designing companies. So in those cases, I can't show you artifacts of how I changed the company because it's not about documentation. It's about conversations and changing people's mindsets and establishing process. And that is one of the more challenging things as I grow my business in this way. I don't have those artifacts to point to. But I think it's also a strength as well, because for many of us whose portfolios are filled with artifacts, they don't say very much about what we do.
Good one. Another question?
I have a question. You already mentioned. Oh, sorry. I know you already mentioned some of the behind-the-scenes things you need to do to be a business, but like, what are some of the most basic elements that like no one's going to hire you if you're not, say, like an LLC or you don't have a lawyer or something like that? Or do people start hiring you off the bat even if you don't have those little elements to go solo?
Okay, so I promise you that anyone in the world, there may be somebody who will hire you no matter what you have, who you are, or anything else. There's always someone to hire you. It's just a matter of whether that's someone you want to be working with. We were having a conversation earlier about whether you need to be incorporated in order to be independent. It's not a requirement, but I strongly recommend it.
I do too.
Strongly recommend it. An LLC is a limited liability corporation. That means, in short, that your personal assets are not at risk if you're sued. Very important. I think that the kind of companies, hopefully, that you want to work with expect a certain level of professionalism, and being incorporated, having contracts, allowing the lawyers to negotiate terms in certain situations, all of that is about presenting yourself as a professional. If you walk into a situation where they're all suits and ties, and you're like, hey, what's up? I don't really have a contract. I'm not really sure how to communicate to you what this project is. You're already putting yourself at a disadvantage. So I try to be as professional as I can. However, you can be professional without being formal, and that's really important to me. So my contracts are not 15 pages. They don't use a lot of lawyer speak. They use plain language approved by my lawyer. All the decisions that we make on a project are well documented. Everything that the person says to me in person is repeated back to them in an email. I'm very thorough. I send invoices, I send thank you notes for payments received. It's all tracked. You have to be professional the way a business needs to present itself. But that doesn't mean that you have to do it in the most painful way possible.
Any other questions? Yeah, Tom.
Who's Tom?
Hi, thanks for coming and talking today.
Oh, my pleasure.
You ran through some of the things about vetting a company, and you didn't get into too many specifics. To me, that's the meat of, maybe working. Can you give us some examples or some standard things you look for and some
Sure thing.
pitfalls maybe that you've run into?
So I decided very early on that I was not in the business of making companies care about their customers. I'm in the business of helping companies who care be better to their customers. So in the initial conversations, when I'm talking about my process, which includes research, no matter what the project is, research is a component of it. And I can thank my professor, Bonnie John, who happens to be in the audience unexpectedly. Defining the goals, doing the necessary research with stakeholders, doing the necessary research with target audiences. If they are not at all willing to engage in that process, I'm not willing to work with them. The beauty of being a consultant is that you don't have to take the project, and that in many ways you're being hired for your process really more than anything else. If they knew how to come to the right solutions, they would be doing it internally. They may think they are, but they are not hiring you to have the best answers. You're not a magician, you're not a mind reader, you don't somehow know what's right for their business more than they do. But you have techniques and you have ways for conducting those activities, and sometimes in a particular order, sometimes not in that order, that yield results and that ensure that the work is done effectively. So if they're not willing to engage in that, I'm not willing to work with them. Other red flags are when they quibble with the terms of the contract. I require at minimum 50% of the project rate paid up front. If they're like, oh, what about 10% or whatever it's like, anything that indicates that the money isn't there or that it's going to take a really long time to get, oh, well, we really do net 60 on with all of our contractors. Okay, well, you're going to do net 30 on this one. You can make the exception. If they're not willing to make the exception, I'm not willing to work with them. I'm not going to compromise on the things that I know at the end of the day will have a significantly negative impact on my business because I'm a business person. Even if it's the coolest challenge with a target audience that I'm obsessed with, that I know is going to put me on the front page of the New York Times if I do this work, if I get any sense that it's going to be a bad business deal, I can't do it because I'm a business person first. Are those enough kind of things to look for? Because I could keep going on that, but
I think there was a question actually right in front of you, Tom.
I had a question about, as you move to more strategic work, how you structure your contracts. When it's based around deliverables, it's a pretty easy metric to accept or reject and to say at the end, you've done your job, thanks. So how do you do that when you get more strategic?
So I am currently working on my third project with a client that I've done two very tactical, I'll call them, projects with previously. I approached it strategically, but they thought they were getting something very concrete, which they ultimately did. They hired me for a third time to get something just as concrete, but I was more upfront since I've established a relationship with them now to say, you don't need an about page. You need to understand who you are as a company. So I had that conversation with them in the negotiation process. They bought it, and so the contract is now not based on deliverable, but it's based on activity. Whether you're doing strategic work or tactical work, brains or hands or whatever along that spectrum, there's still a series of things you're going to do, I suspect. I have a sense ahead of time what some of those things are that I want to do, and I have left enough room in the schedule, and I've been vague enough with the way that I've worded the contract that these are some of the things we're going to do, and these are the order that we're going to do them in. But as things are coming up, we're also adjusting. And you need to make sure that your partner on the client side is on board with that level of fluidity, but that you're being paid on a time basis, not on a deliverable basis. So I have the 50% up front, and then the 50% by this date. It doesn't matter what I've produced or what we've done by that date. That date comes, you've had my time for this long, and that's when I get paid.
Thanks.
Sure.
Over here to your
Hi, I'm not sure that this question will be very articulate, but I'm curious how you...
I can't promise that my answer will be articulate.
I'm curious how you schedule your time, and I'm also independent, and one of the problems I've had is, when is the right time to go looking for new work? Because if you're constantly getting new, queries and so on, you might not be able to actually do that work because you're still busy with something else.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious sort of how you manage that.
The
The pipeline, I guess, is the
Yeah.
question.
So like I said earlier, I don't track my time, so I'm giving the estimate of about a third of my time spent doing the client work. I am always looking for new work. Every blog post that I write, every tweet that I send is an act in looking for new work. I mean, it is. Even if you're like, I'm fishing right now, that's an act in looking for new work. Because everything that you put out there will be received by the rest of the world, and it's there permanently. So I would say I'm always doing business development, and like any good founder of any company, I'm in charge of business development. I'm also in charge of execution. I'm also the only person I can allocate all my projects to. So there are times that I am in meetings from the moment I wake up until the moment my head touches the pillow. Like quite literally, I will have a meeting with the folks in Singapore just before I go to bed. Then there are days that I refuse to have any meetings. So I have struggled with time management because I tend to say yes to too many things because life is short and I hate disappointing people. And I find everything so exciting. That's another part of my problem. So what I now do is I say these days of the week are totally blocked. Not a single meeting, not a phone call, not a 5-minute coffee. There is absolutely no interruption from another human being. Those are the days where I really get my execution done, whether it's writing a post that I've been thinking about, whether it's synthesizing findings from user research into personas, whether it's conducting user interviews, whether it's doing contracts or whatever it is. That is time that is sacred. And I actually learned this technique of completely blocking out full days with no exception from Paul Graham, a VC, who on his blog wrote an essay titled The Manager versus the Maker Schedule. And it gave me this idea to have making days and have managing days. And managing days are days that I meet with people where I manage my client relationships, I meet with prospects, I mentor people, I get mentored by people, I meet, random folks that are introduced to me for one reason or another. Meetings, phone calls, running around the city like a lunatic. And then there's the making days where it is 100% protected time, and it's been working.
Nice. I think we have time for one more. Do I see somebody back?
I have a simple question.
Okay.
Super
Rodrigo.
quick.
Hang on, let's get the mic for you.
Oh, man. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Oh, sure. Anytime.
I don't know if this is an Andrew, but if you had one recommendation for a conference to go to, since you are a world traveler, like what should we save our pennies for?
Oh my goodness.
Good one.
What's the one?
There's one conference that I pay for every year myself. I try very hard not to pay for conferences now that I don't have someone to expense them to. I pay for the IA Summit every year. The reason I choose to do that,
That's the information.
the Information Architecture Summit. The reason I choose to do that, lots of reasons. Firstly, it was the place where I spoke for the first time. They are very, very open to new blood. It's part of the purpose of the conference. There are something like 50% new attendees every year. It's smaller than a lot of other conferences. It's much more intimate. And that's where I learned that I could be independent for the first time, because I met other practitioners and I said, where do you work? And they say, for myself. And I was like, huh? You mean we could be user experience designers and work for ourselves? How? So the people that I've met there, the opportunities that I've been given, the content somewhat, but less so. It's more about who's there and what the culture and the values of the conference is, that I will pay, no matter where they are, every year, I will pay to keep going there. Otherwise, my recommendation is volunteer or get yourself a speaking gig so that you can get to as many conferences as possible without having to pay for them.
Very cool.
Thank you, and that brings us up on time, actually. I think we did it.
Oh my God.
So, 8 o'clock, and thank you guys very much for being here for this. So how about a round of applause? I really hope that everyone got something out of this conversation tonight. You know, I know I definitely did. You know, I'm probably going to go home like all sorts of scheming and oh boy, you know, lots of wonderful ideas planted in our heads tonight. So let me see. I have some closing announcements. Give me 1 second here.
And I'm not going anywhere, so for as long as people have questions, I'll stay. And if any of those questions are private or personal, happy to talk to you in private setting.
All right, so first off, I wanted to remind people that on the NYC UXPA website, we actually have a member directory which allows you to post details about yourself. I've had people contact me and say, you know, do you have a list of UX practitioners that I point them to the site. We also have our LinkedIn group page and our Facebook page, which has allowed us to crowdsource when people have jobs, like UX-related jobs that they want to promote. So if you are hiring, we do welcome you to post to our, particularly to our group page on LinkedIn. Is anybody hiring here tonight? Or anybody working for companies that are hiring? All right, very nice. So what I would suggest is, like after the event is over, I try to give people who are hiring a place, like a real estate zone where they can congregate, you know. We didn't do the elaborate stuff that we have done in the past with flags or stickers tonight, but I do see that we have one landmark in the room that I can point to, and it's that table over here next to our wonderful caption provider here who was able to provide caption services for you tonight. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Renata Reed.
Renata Reed, thank you for being here tonight. So if you are hiring, I would encourage you to please come over here to this table at the end of the event, and anyone who is interested in talking to them, please come and talk to them. Let's see. I think I would really, again, like to thank Freddie and Rick Klein, Dr. Rick Klein, who runs the department here at PACE. A big round of applause. Thank you. Some of our best events, I think, have been done right here in this room, like the paper airplane races that we did, and the resume speed dating event, which, like we said, is coming up again in October. That'll be a Saturday event this time around, and that is a great event where you can actually get exposure to not just recruiters, but to people who are in a position to do UX hiring for their companies. They volunteer their time. We put what we did here, for those who may not know, we actually sat chairs around the room and did speed rounds. Like, so people brought their resumes and sat at different, sat with somebody for like 3 or 4 minutes with a hiring manager, some fairly highly placed people. Tom, you were one of them too, I think I remember. And they got to have their resume reviewed in under a minute or 2 and get like feedback, and then we blew the whistle, and then you got up and you moved to the next one, and you worked your way all the way around the room. It was an opportunity for a person to have their resume looked at by like 10 people in one night, and you could start to hear patterns, So anyways, I'm just promoting that a little bit tonight. I think it's a great event. I'd like to thank our volunteers, without whom this would just not be possible. Ruth over here, that was our new vice president. Ron, could you guys stand up for a second? You and Ruth, please stand up, because this is actually an important milestone. This is September, and in September, the way our organization is set up is when the new officers take place. Well, you haven't had a new president in a while, so I can't do anything fancy there, and our treasurer is still Mary Michaels. But here we actually do have a passing of the torch. Ron was our last VP. Dun, da, 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 da. So Ruth is as the 2012-2013 VP. So we're very happy. So again, thanks to Pace. Thank you, Whitney, for being here tonight, and thank you all of you. And we'll see you hopefully next month. Thank you.